Alright, let's see how this goes. I'm trying to do this unscripted for the first time because writing a script is really hard. And the last time that I wrote a script, it sounded like I was about to cry. Which I might sound like right now, but I'm not. I recently competed in the GoGodotJam 3, which was really fun. It was great to see everyone in the community, and it was great to work on a game using Godot and see everyone else using Godot as well. Many other people chose to make a 2D game, but unfortunately for me, I'm very stubborn. My continuous sin when it comes to game jams is being too ambitious. Someday, I will not overscope, but it is not this day. I've been working on making reusable modules whenever I can. Basically, that means it's a big block of code that doesn't really need anything else to work, and I can just plop it into my new project and let it work. It's super nice because for my project, for this jam, I already had an item system built out. I already had a player controller built out, and I could focus on actually fulfilling the design goal because I was a bit ambitious. I've gotten into watching YouTubers playing horror games, and I've been interested to see the different kinds of indie, short experience horror games that get made. Specifically when things like cults are brought up, there's always something demonic. There's always this essence that the cult summoned something that they shouldn't have, and that's the monster that's going to get you. The cult is only ever a mechanism for bringing the real monster forth. But living in America and having a memory longer than a few years, there's been some really scary cults here. There's been some really scary events, especially in the 90s, when you look at organizations like Heaven's Gate or the Branch Davidians. People have done some really scary things through coercions of a cult. And so I wanted to try to put that into my horror game, because I could go easy and say that there was a monster that they summoned and, the cultists weren't really all that scary themselves. But really the coercion and the conversion was what I wanted to get at. Now, arguably I did not do a very good job. It was a game jam after all, and I had to limit many things. The theme of the jam was evolution, and so I wanted to get at the evolution of the cult. The cult I created worshipped a figurehead that they called the Lamb, and just like many other of the Christian cults in America, which is where I chose for the setting, the leader portrayed himself as a second Jesus, maybe even one who was better. The leader of the Branch Davidians said that he was a sinful Jesus, and that he was better than Jesus, and that's why his sins were allowed. So because of this, I tried to show the relationships that each of the individual people had to this central leader, to this figurehead, demanded absolute obedience. There's a few key characters, and I tried to make it obvious who is who. The notes scattered around the bunker, the segments underground. It was really enjoyable to make, and I really enjoyed writing and putting together these characters and how they relate to the Lamb, how they relate themselves to the rest of the group, and how they relate to themselves. Now, it's been a bit of time since I worked on this project, and so I'm struggling to feel proud of it. I can see all of the flaws and all of the problems that I made, and I am the only one who can see all of the problems, all of the jank, all of the poor code designs. this would be true, I suppose, if it wasn't open source. But I doubt anyone's gonna sift through my code just to tell me how bad it is. For the graphics, I originally wanted to go for kind of a realistic HD look. I wanted to use some really high quality textures from like Ambient CG and Polyhaven. And I wanted to use quality assets and give a very realistic look to it. But I very quickly found out that my computer could not run it. My graphics card is quite old. It can't even run Vulkan, and so I'm still waiting for Godot. Whenever Godot 4 comes out with finalized OpenGL support, if it does, I'll be waiting for that day. Then again, if I ever make money off of making games, I could probably pay to get a new graphics card and be able to make better games that way. But for this game, because of that limitation, I decided to crunch the textures down to 128 pixels, which just so happens to be the ratio for PlayStation graphics. This might be a unpopular opinion that I have, but I really don't like simulating PlayStation graphics. I've never owned a PlayStation myself, and so I don't have that same nostalgia that so many people do. And so, at least the integer snapping specifically, I really don't like the look of. And so I wanted to especially switch my game and make it look different, make it look unique. And so I stopped worrying about the labels of what I was creating was called. And in every aspect of my life, I've found that when I stop worrying about what things are called and worry more about the quality of the experience, the end product is so much better than it ever could have been. I could have chosen to specifically try to recreate N64 graphics because there's a plugin and resources and a definite boundary of what is defined as N64. But I stopped worrying about it because what I wanted was something I could run on my computer. Ideally, something that could run on the web, but I failed in that. And I wanted it to look good with realism, but not be too intensive. I utilized Godot 3.5, the release candidate 3 at least. I used the portal culling, I used a lot of different optimization techniques. I also used a limited set of PBR maps, which is why I came to call this style retro PBR, because what I would do is I would take 1K or 2K PBR textures off of Polyhaven or Ambient CG, anything I could get that was CC0. And I would crunch it down to 128 pixels each. And then I would use that without filtering in the game. And so it made this really interesting pixel style where each individual pixel is physically rendered, but it's still a sharp pixel in the game. And then on top of that, I rendered it through a viewport with a lowered resolution and a dithering filter. And the dithering filter used blue noise, which essentially made it look kind of blobby, and I turned filtering off for that texture, and it made it so that each of the physically based pixels was also slightly altered by the dithering as almost a subpixel. And this sub-dithering, this almost sub-pixel appearance, gave it this weird grainy, grimy look that was the same computational requirement regardless of what the scene was. It performed the same texture lookup for every pixel that I was rendering, and because I was doing a 1/3 ratio viewport, it was running at a much smaller resolution, and so the pixels were a lot bigger, easier to see. I really like chunky pixels. I think they look neat. But unfortunately, I was very quickly looking to be making a PlayStation-style game. And I briefly even called it that until I settled on Retro PBR. I desperately want this name to catch on, but I don't know if it will, because I don't know if anyone else is actually making games this way. Most of the people that I hear about who are making games have a beefy gaming computer that can render everything they need, and for a while I was just using a laptop. One that I got for school, so all I ever cared about it when I was buying it was, can it do word processing? For the Ascension of the Lamb, I did not do well in the Jam competition. The version that I actually released for the Jam, it was played by Jade the Kobold. They're great.
This is my line for too much dialogue. Right now, I've gotten to the point where there's more text than gameplay, and even though the last text was very interesting, I'm at the point now where it's like, okay, but what is the game? But what am I doing? I'm getting action hungry. You know what I'm saying?
In their playthrough, and I'm sure in many other people's playthroughs, there was a situation where you could soft lock yourself. Because for some reason, the collision shape of a key that you need to open a locked door to progress in the game, the collision would clip through the floor of any floor. And so once you picked it up, it became a physics object, and if you dropped it, it would fall like any other physics object. That's how I set up the items in the whole game, so any of the items, you can just pick them up, and if they're not important, there's nothing you can do with it, but you can pick it up and drop it and put it wherever. But with the key, it was smaller, and for some reason, the smaller collision shape, coupled with the very large tri-mesh colliders I was using, was very, very inaccurate with collisions, and very often would just clip through the floor. And so a lot of people playing my game for the first time, they'd pick up the key, and then they'd drop it, and then it was gone forever. They would never get it back. So I had to fix that, and my solution, because instead of remaking the entirety of the map, I decided to just make the collider bigger, and that worked. At least most of the time. There is a case where you can walk it, you can drop it onto the floor, push it against the wall, and if you keep pushing, because the player is treated as an immovable object, the player's desire to move overrides any physical constraints. That's the factor of using kinematic body, and then moving and not applying force and not checking whether or not to apply said force. So the player would just push it through the map. Since then, I've been very frustrated with this system, and in my next project, I'm actually planning to not use physically based items, especially for like key items that you need to progress. I want to go for a more classic item system where it just is a thing and you interact with it and it goes in your inventory and you can't drop it. Because that is such a pain to deal with. I spend so much time and effort trying to get it to work. As with everything, I was working on this game alone. I kind of prefer working on my games alone because I get to touch every creative aspect of the games. I don't know if I could ever be satisfied just doing one thing. And maybe that'll be my downfall someday, but I really enjoy doing everything. I want to make the models. I want to put together the textures. I want to design the levels and build up the code and all that. My forte will always be with the code. But I at least want to build those artistic skills. Build out better UI and structure things really nice. I also tried to add the focus of accessibility, which did not work very well in the Jam version, but in the post-Jam version I was able to fix it. See, the subtitles add-on that I made looks for a viewport. It specifically uses the root viewport. And something I didn't understand is that Godot, when it makes a scene and runs it, it applies a viewport for the root. And if the scene has a defined viewport node, which I specifically did because I wanted to use a 1/3 pixel ratio, then the subtitles added would only use the viewport of the root and not of the scene. And so because the objects were in the scene, their position relational to the root viewport was always considered 0. And it was such a pain because all of the effort I put into making spatialized subtitles, and all of the subtitles were showing up in the top corner and I didn't know why, and I had a day or two before the jam was over, and I was just tearing my hair out trying to figure out what was going on. And of course I only figured it out after the jam. But I figured it out, and I can make the subtitles add-on that much better. To take a lesson from my elementary school reports, if I had to do this again, specifically make the Ascension of the Lamb all over again, I would probably use a better map-making system. For my next project, I'm specifically looking at using Godot, which might not be how you say it, which is an add-on that lets you load Quake maps into Godot. And it works really well. I get to use Trench Broom to design my map. The collision works impeccably. Everything just is perfect. The only downside is I only see this in retrospect. And I still have a lot to learn because now I'm using a new tool. And I have all kinds of ambitions, which again is always my downfall. I'm going to be a good YouTuber now, and I'm going to say the things that I'm supposed to say that help me get a better placement in the algorithm, okay? You should listen to it and then do it. You're going to like and you're going to comment, you're going to subscribe, you're going to show it to your grandma, you're going to take this video and you're going to walk it over and you're going to use it on your phone and you're going to show it to your grandma, and she's going to like it. Don't you worry. No, she won't know anything that I'm saying. That's okay. It gets me another view. That's fine. Did you think I was joking?